Furious Driving, proud to be supported by Diamond Bright, protecting, cleaning and caring for the Furious fleet and for yours with 10% off using code FD10. Follow the links in the description below.
Hello and welcome to Furious Driving. And we've got a proper little hooligan of a car to run around in today because I've gone back to 1980. We've taken a trip to Essex and we're in a Fiesta, but not just any Fiesta, because this is a 1300 Super Sport, a very, very rare and exciting car. Now, let me take you back to the early 1980s. Everyone remembers the XR2, which is the halo hot hatch from the Ford range. It was the car that everybody wanted. It was Dagenham's answer to the Golf GTI. And of course, it was a huge success in every way. However, the XR2 didn't just appear out of nowhere, because Ford had been dipping their toes in the water of hot hatchery with the Fiesta for a little while beforehand. Now, initially, they'd had a little bit of a go with a thing called the 1300S, which was a lightly modified Mark I Fiesta with the 1.3 or the 1298cc. It was the Kent lump, which is all iron, overhead valve, push rod, 4-cylinder, 66 horsepower. So you might be thinking not a ball of fire, but don't forget these cars were not heavy back in the 1970s. An awful lot of stuff not existing in the car makes them quite light. So performance actually wasn't too bad, but it didn't stir the heartstrings quite enough. So in 1980, Ford released, well, the dress rehearsal for the XR2, which was this, the Super Sport. Now, under the skin, it may well have been very much the similar kind of car. It still had the 1.3 Kent engine in it, and still had the same basis of the body kit. However, Ford did go a little bit more special with this one, because development was handed over to the Special Vehicles Engineering Department over in Dunton in Essex. And those boys know a thing or two about making a Ford go quickly. And not only did they develop it, they built all 3,000 examples. Now, 3,000 is not a big number for a company like Ford. Give you an idea of just quite how, well, special this car is, really. They couldn't leave anything standard. It might still have the Kent engine in it, but they did breathe on it a certain amount. So it's got twin choke Webers, and they also gave it lowered suspension. So on paper, the car still makes 66 horsepower. But again, don't forget, 85 horsepower per tonne. So that means it's good for 0 to 60 in about 11 seconds, and it feels, because of the noise and everything, the visceral experience of it, it feels rapid. However, though, because it is still basically a Mark I Fiesta with a few toys thrown on, a lot of what makes it look and feel special is about the exterior of the car. So let's pull over, have a quick look around the outside and see what really gives this thing the absolute wow factor that makes it such a desirable car. So the Super Sport really was all about the image, the looks. It's a feel-good car, really, but it came with a lot of extra stuff all around the outside. The basis of it, though, was the Series X body kit, and that was basically 4 things. You got the front splitter, you got the arch extensions, you got the alloys, and of course you got the boot spoiler. But to make it a bit more special, because the Series X could have been spec'd on other Fiestas, you got a lot of exclusive stuff as well. You got the side stripes, you got this black surround around the windows, you got, well, this car's been upgraded a little bit. You got twin Hella spot lamps. This car's now got 4 CBs, which look even more rally spec, which is fantastic. And you got a body coloured grille. Awesome. Although this car is missing it, you've got bumper overriders as well. They were literally throwing everything at this car to make it as special as possible. And we do, of course, need to stop and take a moment to appreciate these fabulous RS 13-inch 4-spoke alloys with the 185/60 tyres on them. This is pure 1980s hot hatchery at its absolute finest. Next to a splitter and arch extensions, I mean, wow, does life get better than this? Now the Super Sport was only available in 4 colours. You had black, diamond white, strato silver, and this incredible sunburst red, which is virtually orange, and it is the epitome of 1980s chic. Little extra thing to note is it came with side stripes available in black, grey or red. Curiously though, the red cars were only optioned with the black stripes. This one I think has been restored and someone's chosen to go for the grey stripes because, well, it looks good. And the way you can tell a genuine Super Sport shell, or at least a very good replica, is it's got a little bulge for the spare wheel because it used a wider alloy wheel than the standard steels. And here it is. Right, let's clamber aboard and have a look inside. Before we get in though, let's take a look at these little door handles, which are so cute, and the old Ford blade lock that you can open with a spoon. When we were at college, we used to do that for a laugh. Now, first of all, we've got these lovely Ford door cards. It's pretty simple, and because it is, well, basically a basic Ford car, we have got body colour paint at the top of the door, which in sunburst looks quite exciting. It's a feature now on things like the Fiat Coupe. We haven't got much going on here. We've got a fairly sturdy door handle, we've got a little plastic door release, we've got wind-up windows, manual no less. And we've even got a door pocket though, which is 1980, pretty cool, and a little bit of pressed in fake stitching to make it look like we've got a bit more upholstery going on. Climbing aboard, the Super Sport got a unique seat. We've got the black bolsters, but inside we've got this plaid pattern, and there were 2 choices. You could have red or grey plaid.
They've gone to plaid.
Obviously with the car being the red theme, we've gone to the red plaid. It looks fantastic. Climbing aboard, we have got the addition of a roll cage in this car, but the Super Sport owners were treated to a few little bits of extra luxury. For one thing, that plaid pattern, that is unique to the SS. They also got a rev counter and a radio. Okay, this is from a Cortina, but there was one originally, and a cigarette lighter, which is handy now because obviously we want to charge our phones in this modern time, something you can't do on a more basic Fiesta. So let's look around at the rest of the cabin. This is the best T-shelf I've seen this side of a Rover R8. It's even subdivided for different categories of snack. How good is that? With the sport suspension, things should stay fairly upright as well. Up above the T-shelf, we've got a pair of big vents for the windscreen, which help you keep demisted. And this looks like an ashtray, but in fact it's not. It is the ventilation, sitting there in the top of the dashboard. There are 2 little tiny vents left and right here at the side of the dashboard, but nothing else in the centre. That's quite a curious little arrangement. The binnacle in front of the driver, we've got speedo going up to 100 miles an hour. We've got the rev counter going up to 7,000 RPM, and we've got a couple of dials for temperature, fuel, and a few warning lights. And of course, we've got all presented in this painted silvery grey colour. Interestingly 70s in a 1980s car, but of course it's 1980. It is still really the 1970s at heart. Stepping back from that, we've got a couple of typical Ford switches, got indicators and horn on the left. Wow, that is a hefty pop for a little car. Wow, I'm impressed with that. I'm going to pop again. Wow. Wipers of course on the right, and we've got our 4-spoke rubberized plasticky steering wheel, quite a thin rim to it, and what looks like it's going to be the horn in the centre, but it's not, it's just the Ford badge. Also onto the right hand side, we've got a little extra cubby here on the right hand side for Smarties, and we've got a larger sub cubby for bigger chocolate bars. Back in the centre of the car, we've got more of this silvery stuff surrounding the few controls that we have. I think there are 5 more controls. We've got hazard lights, fog lights, we've got the heater controls, and we've got the rear screen heater, and of course the actual ashtray, which lives down here. These buttons are weirdly chunky for such a little car. Quite amusing. There's a glove box to the left, and underneath we've got this extra pod. Now bear in mind the Mark I Fiesta is a product of the 1970s, and so having a central pod in the middle of the car to put stuff in was still considered a bit of a luxury item. So having this thing in here was pretty cool. That meant you got the clock and you got the radio. This would have had a radio which fitted flush like the clock in a silver surround. Someone has lost that over time, so the owner is currently trying to do something to make this Cortina radio, which is the same era. A radio with a cassette was an option, which we don't think this car had, so trying to keep it as original as possible. We just need to Dremel and paint this surround to make it all fit. In the back, there's not a vast amount of space because it's quite a dinky little car, but we do have moulded side panels which have got speakers in there for the radio and ashtrays, so the kids can have a little quick fag on the way to school because, well, it's the 1970s after all. And looking up above, this will be weirdly reminiscent. This will be ASMR for anyone who grew up in the 1970s or 80s. This fabric, this perforated fabric, was in all Fords for so long, and it just takes you straight back. Looking at that takes you back to your childhood in a funny sort of way. Right, so lifting up the boot, thankfully it has got some quite decent struts in there because that is a fairly hefty, this is such a 1980s thing, the solid rubber spoiler. The downforce is mostly from the weight. We've got actually not a bad boot really. It's quite wide but very low, and underneath there we have, of course, being a car from the good old days. Got a proper spare wheel, full-size alloy, not even a space saver. And also a little reservoir for your rear screen. And on the right-hand side, just a little bit more storage, which is super handy. And the previous owner of this car basically wanted to relive his youth and do the things that he couldn't afford to do when he was 17. So we've got the rear strut brace as well as that roll cage in there as well. He's also lowered it a bit and put a pretty cool exhaust on there. Here we are, back on the road again. Now mechanically, it is very much a Mark 1 Fiesta. However, it does have lowered suspension, it's got disc brakes at the front, drum brakes at the rear, and of course, you only get a 4-speed gearbox in it. But that was normal back in 1980. And all the gearboxes were 4-speed, there's no 5-speed option and no silly automatic either. Fun was the order of the game, but motorways perhaps less so. Now because the Super Sport was already fairly well optioned up, there was only 2 option packs you could add to it, the Executive and the Climate Control. Although that didn't mean air condition, it meant you got a sunroof. This one I believe is an aftermarket sunroof. But the thing to remember is this was a successful car, it sold well, and it laid the groundwork for the even more successful XR2. And of course, by the late 1980s, these were becoming cheap. And so these were just absolutely ragged senseless by so many teenage boys who got their first car and didn't want a basic Fiesta Popular, a Popular Plus. They wanted a Super Sport, they wanted that 1298 with the Webers. As well as the ubiquitous Ford Tinworm, an awful lot of these have been driven into things. So there aren't very many left. Maybe 150 or so that are known about. Currently, I think there are about 56 that are taxed on the road. Well, that's a big jump, because about 5 years ago, there were only 11 taxed on the road, which suggests that people are starting to, well, give them a bit of love and a bit of care and attention and start restoring them, like this one has been. Now, driving it just takes you straight back to those late 70s, early 80s days. The steering is really rather light, not power assisted obviously, and it's reasonably direct, not many turns lock to lock despite the lack of power steering. The brakes, well, yeah, with only 775 kilos to stop, it does anchor on pretty quickly and the nose just dips. There was lowered suspension as standard, but this has been lowered even further. So it's quite a hard ride, harder than I was expecting from a 1980 Fiesta. And we've got that lovely, that Kent 4-cylinder growl at the front, which is enhanced, of course, by the big bore exhaust. It's not quite a cherry bomb, but it's a bit of an evolution from that, but you know, still get that whole feeling of it. It just feels really eager and really willing to please. It's like a playful puppy that just wants to bounce around and have fun, throw a ball and it'll chase it. It's a fun car. I also quite like the fact it's got the roll cage in it. Safety being an afterthought in the 1970s. These aren't the strongest things in an impact, so if this one was to have a bump, this roll cage would certainly do you a favour. And of course, being a Ford, the pedals are all nice and light, so anyone can drive this car. Anyone from your nan to the local hard man would be comfortable with this. Oh, it turns in and pitches around so well. This is so much fun. It just goes to show you don't need a ridiculous number of horsepower to have fun in a car. Just get the handling right, get the chassis right, give it just enough power, and you can have some fun with the thing. This is where modern cars need to be going back to. Compact, lightweight. Well, I do hope you've enjoyed this ride out in this fantastic little Fiesta, the precursor to the XR2. If you have, please, as always, hit like and subscribe. Join us again next time driving something completely different.